There comes a time when you switch on your television and hit play on a movie, and for the entire 95 minutes of its runtime, the only theme, the only phrase really that echoes incessantly in your mind is, "This movie's playing me." It doesn't happen often, but by the gods, when it does, it tends to stick with you. That was my experience with The Ugly Truth, a film that kept baffling me with its audacity because you have to be audacious enough to try and package a bullshit premise as a rom com, which was neither funny nor romantic, and we are meant to root for it as the audience. Like, what? Now, for the longest time, I thought The Ugly Truth was the Catherine Heigl movie where she had a one night stand and became pregnant. And so when this movie started, I was confused as hell to see her as a producer dealing with Gerard Butler's Mike's raging misogynistic bullshit. It threw me off for the longest time before I realized that this is a different movie and I have absolutely no knowledge of this plot except that it was driving me up the wall, which in turn meant that it was the perfect pick for Romcom Gander Tuesday. Now, for those who are just finding my channel or who are just stumbling on this series for the first time, Romcom Gander Tuesday is a weekly video series I have on my channel whereby I pick a rom-com from the late 80s to the mid 2010s. Often it's a rewatch. On the rare occasions like this one, it's a first time watch. Either way, I watch the film and analyze it to see how well they hold up years later, especially viewing them through my now adult and slightly more cynical lens. Sometimes I stumble on a rom-com that I actually still enjoy even upon its rewatch. Hello, The Last Holiday, and 10 Things I Hate About You. And sometimes I do a rewatch of a rom com that I loved back in the day, but upon seeing it again as an adult, I walk away with a "what the hell did I just watch?" Case in point, the travesty that is My Best Friend's Wedding. I repeat, sucking your ring off of your best friend's finger is not in any way platonic. Gods, that movie stressed me out so goddamn much. Sorry. I got distracted for a moment there. If this is your first time discovering the series, kindly note that I usually split these videos into three parts: the intro, which is what you're watching right now, the synopsis of the movie, and finally my thoughts. As such, I will have timestamps put in so you can navigate it as you so choose. Now, before I move on to the synopsis part of the video, I would like to say a big thank you to my lovely patrons and YouTube members whose support have been instrumental in helping me continue to make content, especially since I started doing this full time at the start of last year, which was the last time I was in paid employment. And a special shout out to Kat, Lena, Sherry, and Holly for their extra support. You get all the hearts and kisses to mwah. If you too would like to support me on Patreon or become a YouTube member to enjoy certain perks, maybe even get a shout out, the link to do so is in the description bar. Now, with that all said and done, The Ugly Truth kicks off by introducing us to the character of Happy Richer, played by Catherine Heigl, a competent producer on a morning show who is universally liked and adored by her team since she gets the work done, knows just what to say to soothe tense moments, and is able to get everyone's teamwork up to snap. The problem, however, though, is that even with all her hard work, her show's ratings are in the dumps, something that is very upsetting to her boss, Stuart, who declares that Abby has to come up with ideas to fix things, otherwise, the network executives who own their stations might just fire them both. After work, Abby meets up with her blind date, and quick side note here: if a man who you connected with online shows up and you realize that he lied to you about his height, that is usually a red flag that speaks to his insecurities, and best believe it's going to find its way into your relationship should you proceed with it. Just my 2 cents. As one would expect, the date doesn't go very well, especially when the dude she had matched with realized just how controlling and a tad bit anal Abby is. She returns home disappointed, and while she's still dealing with that, her cat sits on her remote, which, mind you, has happened to me a lot. Which then switches her TV to a local show titled The Ugly Truth, where Mike Chadway, played by 300's Gerald Butler, most likely a play on the word Chad, is a misogynistic piece of shit who couches his sexism beneath the veneer of he's just sharing the ugly truth that women need to know about men and dating. The ugly truth, mind you, basically boils down to be sexy, be patient, have zero expectations because that's just who men are, and be good at giving blowjobs. Abby is incensed by this and calls into the show to light into Mike. Except it doesn't go as well as she had hoped. He instead makes fun of her requirements for a boyfriend, basically calls her delusional, and flat out declares that she must be ugly. The next morning, when Abby gets to work, her boss informs her and her colleagues that due to the declining ratings of their show, it's decided that they need just the right injection of misogyny to bring the television watching crowd around, and introduces Mike as a new addition to the show that Abby serves as a producer on, to her horror. Mike, of course, lives up to the hype, being sexist and crass as possible, which all the men in the room ignore because, hey, at least he's isn't sexually harassing them. And he throws in a line about Abby not being ugly after all when she clues him in on the fact that she's the one who had called in on his show. Now, Mike doesn't win any favors with Abby, and the two butt heads a lot, especially with Mike's tendencies to go off script whilst on the air, but things come to a bit of an equilibrium when Abby meets her neighbor, Colin, her new neighbor, Colin, an orthopedic doctor who meets all her requirements for her dream boyfriend and someone that she's very clearly very interested in. But she comes on a bit too strong, which seems to have Colin stepping away from her. And then in comes Mike, who gives Abby advice that basically overhauls her entire personality and wardrobe. Hell, he even changes her hair, all with the singular goal of helping Abby catch the attention of Colin, since he and Abby have a bet that if he's able to help her snag Colin, then she would agree to work with him. But if he fails, he would leave her show for good. Clearly, his plans work, and Abby is able to catch and keep Colin's attention. And the two start dating, with Mike throwing the occasional glances Abby's way when she's happy at the little ways that Colin shows that he's thinking about her. And as per their agreement, Abby works with Mike, and their show thrives as a result. This, in addition to him basically being able to revitalize the sex lives of his co anchors, Georgia and Larry, by basically blaming the former for the latter feeling emasculated because Georgia is making more money than him. I swear, this damn film. Anyway, as I was saying, things are on the up and up. Mike and Abby forge a friendship that sees him even making inquiries into her sex life. And upon finding out that she has never masturbated, he purchases vibrating underwear for her that leads to a scene where Catherine Heigl has to act like she's having an orgasm whilst at a work dinner. And all I could do in that moment was compare her acting to Meg Ryan's in When Harry Met Sally. And sorry, Catherine kind of fell short on it because Meg set the standard. Plus, I'm still side eyeing the fact that Michael had discovered the remote in the hands of a kid midway through dinner, didn't attempt to get said remote, and instead found it funny that Abby had her orgasm in front of their boss and their boss's boss, which was clearly meant to be a humiliating experience when you really think about it. But the movie, as always, glosses over it because, Mike Chadway is a dick, and Abby needs to loosen up. However, Mike is, however, a dick that is doing wonders for the channel's ratings, which means that when their boss catches wind that Mike is about to be poached by a much bigger station in Los Angeles, he sends Abby after him to intercept him after his guest appearance on The Late Show with Craig Ferguson. Abby, who is miffed by this arrangement since she and Colin had planned a romantic weekend getaway together where they were going to have sex for the first time as a couple, still heads over to Los Angeles to try and convince Mike anyway. When she arrives, she steps into her role as his producer, offering him support and encouragement and guidance when he starts to get cold feet, and is intrigued when the questions Mike has to answer reveal that he had once had his heart broken by some unknown woman. A moment of vulnerability immediately covers with being crass, as is his usual MO. Afterwards, when they are having dinner at a bar, she mentions the job offer, and Mike tells her that he turned it down as he wants to stay in Sacramento instead so he can be in his nephew and his sister's life, which is such a big relief to Abby. Afterwards, they dance, and there's clearly a connection that is starting to build, all of which comes to a head when they make out in the elevator, after which they part ways. When Abby gets to her hotel room, she's clearly hot and bothered and wishes she and Mike had gone all the way. And so when she gets the knock on her door, she rushes to it, excited that Mike has showed up, only to be disappointed to see that it is Colin, who figures that if they can't make it to their romantic getaway weekend. He can bring their romantic getaway weekend to her hotel room. There's some mishap with champagne that has Colin stripping out of his clothes, which is the moment that Mike shows up after he's worked up the courage to tell Abby about how he feels. The minute he sees Colin, however, he immediately chickens out and walks away. And when Abby chases after him to try and gauge how he feels about her after telling him that Colin showed up to surprise her, but she can't send him away, Mike tells her not to bother and walks away instead. But Abby, who has come to the realization that she possibly has feelings for Mike, can't continue to lie to Colin. And so she tells him the truth about how the woman is been dating and is basically falling for is all a ruse, as she's the very antithesis of all of that, since she's exactly the kind of controlling woman that Colin seemingly cannot stand. As one would expect, she breaks up with him afterwards and makes it back to the office, only to be hit with the news that Mike has quit and has instead decided to take up a job with their rival station right there in Sacramento. Abby is infuriated and declares that she can easily find herself another Mike Chadway. The problem, though, is that no one else quite compares, and Mike's replacement is even more of a sleaze bag than he is, which is saying a lot. When he starts veering straight into talking about sexual assault right on air, Abby kicks his ass off screen, takes over the microphone, and goes on a rant about how cowardly men actually are, especially when it comes to time to talk about their feelings. Mike, who is also at the same hot air balloon location and who is very aware that Abby is talking about him, runs over to where they are recording, interrupts her on air, and joins her in the balloon where they proceed to argue, unaware that said balloon has risen high up in the air. When Mike tries to leave, he discovers that the distance is way too high for him to try and make the jump, ensuring that he and Abby are effectively stuck together whilst they are both unaware that the hidden camera in the balloon is still rolling and is broadcasting their entire interaction to the station and the city as a whole. Mike argues about how difficult it is for a man to step up to the plate when he has to compete against perfection like Abby's perfect man's list, and is stunned when Abby immediately calls him a jackass and informs him that she had broken up with Colin that very same night. Mike, like I said, is stunned, and then he takes the chance to tell Abby that he loves her, which at first she doesn't actually hear since she's hyper focused on him calling her controlling, and he has to repeat it several times before it dawns on her that he's telling her he loves her. When she asks him why, she's relieved when he tells her that he doesn't really know since she's so different from what he's always wanted in a woman, an answer that makes her happy when compared to Collins, whose response had basically convinced her that the woman he liked and was falling for was the fake version of herself that she had shown him. With Mike, however, he highlights her true self, and a happy Abby kisses him as they fly off into the sunset in the balloon, and everything is captured on the broadcast cameras to the delight of Abby's assistant. We then cut to Abby and Mike in bed together having sex, with Abby being vocal as hell. And when they are done, Mike asks her if she was faking it or if the sex really was that good. To which Abby teases him with a wink as she responds that he will never know. The end. Now, when I say that the ugly truth was playing in everyone's face, I really do mean it was playing in everyone's face. It played in the face of Colin, in the face of Abby, in the face of Mike. And yes, I know he was a misogynistic asshole, but it still played in his face. It played in the face of the unfortunate viewers of that particular morning show segment. It played in Georgia's face. And the most important part is the way in which it played in our face as the audience. Everyone got played by this damn ugly ass movie, and I cannot wrap my head around how and why this script was written. So let us start with the obvious one and get it out of the way, Mike Chadway, because I know the minute I mentioned how Mike was one of the people that this movie dealt a bad hand to, a lot of you were probably shocked by this since it was written to be the most chauvinistic, misogynistic piece of shit in this movie. And that is the problem. The fact that his character was basically created with that in mind, whereby the writers had him chock full of all of these tropes without really giving him much depth, except for the fact that he's a great uncle to his nephew, and that's about it. Mike Chadway reads like a character that someone decided, I want to write a pig and give him human form. And he's just going to be this person that is filled with all of the negative things that most women find infuriating. Is going to be this odious mix of sexist, misogynistic takes, whilst at the same time, we'll have him be this fuck boy oozing sex appeal that keeps getting all these women to fawn over him. And he's going to be our love interest who gives our lead character dating advice that she so sorely needs and encourages her to loosen up. It's so reminiscent of yet another 2000s movies, Is Not That Into You, but whereas Alex, played by Justin Long, was also a player who doesn't like commitment and who also undertakes this journey to teach Jennifer Goodwin's Gigi everything she needs to know about gaining the attention of the man she wants, whilst also teaching her how to be able to tell if said person is into her or not. The difference between Alex and Mike is that the former isn't written to be a dig bag with zero to little redeeming qualities, even though we get to spend more time with Mike than we did with Alex in that movie. Like, if you're going to sell us on a character like Mike seemingly being more than is meant to appear initially, which I'm guessing is what the writers were aiming for, then more effort had to have been put into building him as a character and us being able to see moments of vulnerability that he's trying to hide, but which still occasionally often slips through. Having him make cow eyes at Abby during certain moments is not enough to show that, because fundamentally Mike had been established as someone who doesn't actually respect women and sees casually degrading them as the average Tuesday morning for him. And the worst part is it does this unprovoked, unprompted. Like, this movie is so desperate to show him in the most villainous of light possible, which, to be honest, isn't fair to him at all, because it doesn't read like it was written as a character who is multidimensional. He's a prop to serve a purpose. And as a result, he doesn't really get much character development because of that. And please, please don't tell me him kissing Abby and then showing up afterwards, which he leaves shortly later because he saw Colin. Please don't tell me that you think that that counts as character development, or a brief moment about him looking sad that he's had his heart broken by other women in the past. It's as bad as him suddenly springing the I love you on Abby as well as we, the audience, because all I kept asking slash wondering was, how did we get here? In what ways were we meant to see any seeds being sown that implied that he was falling for her? How was the believability established in this regard? You would think having three women write the script for this movie would have at least helped with the raging sexism and chauvinism that permeated it. But a part of me wonders if that wasn't a deliberate choice on their part to just have Mike be the mouthpiece for everything they consider vile that a man can say and do, especially within the work environment. And if that's the case, then yes, it really isn't fair on Mike Chadway, because when you spend 95% of his screen time convincing us that this man is a piece of shit, trying to course correct, and the remaining 5% of the screen time doesn't actually work, nor does it feel earned. Instead, we walk away from the movie convinced that Mike is nothing but a caricature made up of majority flaws, the representation of the worst misogynistic takes that can be cramped into one person, that the movie wants us to root for at the end because romance. And then, of course, there's Colin Anderson, the gorgeous orthopedic surgeon who rescued Abby from the tree when she was about to topple out of it, a struggle that gave her a face full of his dick. He was polite and kind, and he hit all of Abby's boxes, and so she was eager to date him. So eager that she came on a bit too strong, which was where Mike showed up with his takes to teach Abby how to not be so desperate, whilst at the same time be able to lock down Colin. And Mike's suggestions do work. The problem, however, for me is the fact that when we get to the end of the film, Abby basically asks Colin why he likes her. And whilst his first two reasons are adequate, the further he speaks, the more Abby becomes even more saddened as she admits the truth that she's been pretending all along. And the woman that Colin likes isn't her. Matter of fact, his aversion for women with controlling tendencies allude to the fact that they wouldn't have had a chance together because Abby is a bit of a control freak. And that is why I consider the movie having played in Colin's face, because to be fair, he is a 9 out of 10 type of guy. In another movie, he would be the lead, but because the premise of The Ugly Truth requires that Abby ends up with Mike, Colin got shafted as a result, because let us be real. Yes, Abby did hide most of who she was from Colin, but one, that was on instructions from Mike. But two, and most importantly for me, what is to say that if she had been honest, Colin wouldn't have fallen for her? Like it took Mike, at least according to the movie, it took him a while to fall for Abby regardless. And prior to that, she wasn't the type of woman he was usually interested in. In fact, one could say that it was more like Colin with regards the kind of woman he liked. And then they changed, things changed. Colin might have changed given time, especially if the space was created for Abby to be herself and for him to get to know her, truly know her. But that was never going to happen because Colin wasn't the male lead. And so he was never going to get that opportunity, even though I repeat, he was a 9 out of 10 type of guy. He just didn't have the luck of being the lead, and the narrative played in his face as a result. And then, of course, there's Abby, who from the moment she first showed up with her neurotic ass, I was in love. She's smart, she's conscientious, she's competent and great at her job. Not like that helps her with her failing ratings, all of which then contributes to the many ways that this film plays in her face consistently. A producer of her caliber suddenly being saddled with a new talent to manage without any notice or heads up was clearly her boss playing in her face. Having her and Mike's first meeting at work be one that is riddled with sexual harassment, which everyone conveniently ignores because the person who Mike is basically harassing in that moment is Abby and not them, is the movie playing in her face, having her do the work and the ratings go up. And when it is time to meet the broadcast owners, the partners who own the broadcasting station, when it's time to meet them at dinner, they completely ignore her and focus all their attention instead on Mike, whilst paying her and all the work and effort she had done up until that point and even afterwards dust. Is this movie playing in her face? Her being all giddy about Mike asking for tap water with a reason that is similar to hers is such a cheap way that the movie tries to convince us of these two's feelings and being right for each other, which is just cap because up until that point, Abby hadn't really even expressed any sort of interest in Mike. I mean, we understand why she was initially attracted to Colin. It fit all her boxes and preferences. What I do not get at all is where this supposed connection with Mike was meant to come from, considering that whilst he was making cow eyes at her, she was falling for her new boyfriend. Like everything just seems so rushed with this film. Maybe if it had a longer run time, the writing might have been able to create moments of believability for us. But with what we got, sorry, I am not buying it. Having Abby fall for Mike, this man who has demeaned her from the very first moment they met, hell, even before they met when she called into his program, having her fall for him when very little work was done to establish that interest or the basis for which she would do so, other than the fact that he's hot, makes zero sense. It's plain in her face and it's plain in the face of we, the audience. It's given they are in love because we say they are in love with zero attempt to actually show us how they arrived at that point. And like I said, it's the movie playing in our face as the audience. Like I said earlier, most genres do operate by rules of engagement through which the premise for which the genre exists has to be fulfilled by whatever medium that is exploring it. And with the ugly truth, it fails in that regard for me because if you're going to tout yourself as a rom-com, then at least give me some comedy and romance. That is the basic prerequisite for this film. We get very little romance. Hell, we didn't even get a big gesture from Mike. And please don't tell me him coming over to Abby's hotel room after which he bailed shortly afterwards. Please don't tell me that that is a gesture because it isn't. Him dropping in to join her in the hot air balloon isn't a gesture either for those who might want to spin it that way. This man gave Abby a confession wrapped with some vaguely patronizing shit, and we are meant to swoon and eat it up. I call bullshit. And you know who else should have called bullshit? Georgia Bordene, because Mike's piece of shit has basically called her a gold digger who fucked her way to the top while she was on air. And this movie had her focus on the fact that he said she was in her 40s instead, as some sort of he, let's laugh about Georgia losing her mind about being called old moment, instead of the fact that she was basically called inept and incompetent who only caught her big break because she fucked her way into it. This coming from her colleague. Mike's ass should have been hit with a lawsuit. The fucking station should have been hit with a lawsuit. I just kept screaming and yanking my hair when that happened because this fucking ass movie played that bit for laughs and had me for a moment there doubting my own mind and my own ears, because what the hell did he just say, and how the hell are all of these characters simply letting it slide and trying to play this for laughs? This isn't funny. And then he hit me. Of course, they are letting it slide. This entire movie's premise simply plays in everyone's faces. But of course, these are just my thoughts. I would, as always, love to hear yours. Whether or not you agree with me, please share them in the comments. Like this video, however, if you've watched this far and haven't done so yet, but enjoyed anything of what I had to say, share it so others can find my channel as well. Or you can check out my gaming or ASMR channels if they sound like something you might potentially be interested in. I have them both linked in the description bar. I will see you tomorrow with a new video. Until then, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.